So I've been working out of this bedroom studio for almost 2 years now, and those of you that have watched the channel for a long time, you know what my old studio looked like, which was an actual storage closet in my parents' basement. We lived there for a few years to save up to end up buying this place. So when I moved in here, it was a massive upgrade. Now, since moving in, I've made a few tweaks to this room here and there, but yesterday we did a complete overhaul on this space. I mean, every single piece of gear, every cable, every snake came out. We rewired the whole thing, reorganized all of the gear for a very specific purpose. So this is what we've been working on behind the scenes for the last couple of weeks. As you can see, we've painted the entire studio black, and it's not done. We still have a ton of work to do in here, but we're at the point where we want to start using and filming and recording in here. So the plan is to get this room treated acoustically and visually, which we're in the middle of doing right now. And we're gonna run a snake from my studio bedroom upstairs down here to the live room and basically use the upstairs studio as the temporary control room for the time being. As you can see, the actual control room is basically being used as storage right now, but we're still working on all that in there. Now I've got a few projects coming up here starting next week that you're gonna see on the channel, and I'm really, really excited about it. No Guthrie and Good Trouble are coming down for a week, and we're gonna start working on new music down here. We're gonna try and record 2 new singles and a few performance videos that you'll see here on the YouTube channel, as well as on the band channel, which will be announced very soon. Then after that, a friend of mine named Susie Jones, who's an artist I've been producing for the last year, we have a really cool live tracked EP project that we're gonna do down here a few days after that, which you will also see here on the channel. Point is, I was really tired of waiting on this space to be done, and we're just gonna make do with what we've got for the time being and start making music down here. So I'm really excited to show you what's going to be happening down there very, very soon. But in the meantime, I thought I would give you a studio tour video. Now, I get questions pretty regularly about my setup, various aspects of my production workflow, from cameras and lighting to the guitar rack behind me to the outboard gear that I use. So this is sort of the end all be all. My hope is that this is essentially the final form of this room, and I want to document it as it is now and answer any questions that people may have before we move on. Now, a quick disclaimer, before we get into the video, I want you to understand something. You do not need all of this stuff in order to make content or to make music or to be creative. I've been collecting this gear for over 12 years now, and I'm doing it with a very specific purpose. I want to track bands. The way I like to work is with musicians in a room capturing performances, and to do that, you need more gear. But you don't have to have all of this stuff to start your YouTube channel or to make your album. You can do it with a basic setup. And in fact, we just built one of those setups for my production assistant, Chris. Now, Chris has been working with me for 2 years now, and recently he needed to upgrade his recording setup. So as a thank you to him and all the hard work that he's put into helping me make this channel for the last 2 years, I teamed up with Sweetwater, Sennheiser, and Universal Audio to give him a super versatile pro recording setup that will work in a variety of situations. So we got him hooked up with a Universal Audio Apollo Twin, and since Chris is currently renting a place, he can't treat a room, and he has roommates, so he can't record and mix with studio monitors. We got him a great set of Sennheiser headphones and one mic to record everything, the Universal Audio SD1. Now, a setup like this is super powerful. For Chris, he can record his tracks for his Instagram profile, which I've linked down below. And he also does weekly improv jam sets around Atlanta that he wants to be able to record and turn into content and posts later. So with this setup, he can kind of do all of that. And the cool thing is Sweetwater has agreed to give an identical setup away. So if you want to enter the giveaway, it's linked in the description box down below. And I want to thank Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. I will have affiliate links for a lot of the stuff we're talking about in the description box down below. You can find most of this stuff on Sweetwater. And if you're trying to build your own home studio setup or getting into YouTube content creation or trying to make that next album and you need some gear, Sweetwater is a great resource for all of that. So thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. Now, this has been a long intro, and this is going to be a long video. So we've got chapter markers set for each section of the studio build, so you can jump to whichever section you're most interested in. We're going to cover the amp rack, the computers, the lighting and camera setup, the outboard gear, the desk. All that stuff's going to be covered. So whatever you're most interested in, check out the chapter down below, and let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna start with the amp rack. Now, I get more questions about this rack than just about anything else I've ever done on YouTube. So we bought this a few years ago as a scratch and dent floor model. Got it on sale from Crate and Barrel. I don't know if they even still make this model, but it wasn't intended to be an amp rack. And when we moved in, it was supposed to go in our living room, and I hijacked it and moved it up here because I thought it would look great and work great as an amp rack, and I was right. Now, since doing this, I've actually wanted to figure out a way to team up with a carpenter or furniture builder to create some plans for people who are handy to be able to build this themselves. And actually, it might be a cool thing to try and collab with somebody on. I've been a huge fan of I Like to Make Stuff since like 2016. I've been watching his channel, and I know he's a guitar player. So Bob, if you're watching this and you want to work with me on this project, I figured we could design and make something similar to this and then maybe release the plans or something out to you guys for those of you that want to build your own amp rack. Now, all of the amps that you see here and on top of this sidecar here are all run into this piece of gear down in the rack. This is sort of the brains of my guitar amp situation. This is the Ampete 88S Studio, and this is an amp and cab switcher. So essentially what you can do is plug 8 amp heads in and up to 8 different cabinets in, and this piece of gear will handle everything. As you know, guitar amps, when they're on, they need to see a load. So this handles all of the impedance and the load, and then you just run out of your guitar or out of your pedal board into the front of the Ampete, and then you just bank through and pick whichever amp you want to go into whichever cabinet. Now, because I'm recording in a bedroom, I don't have the space to be able to use actual cabinets in here very often. Occasionally we do, but for most of the time I'm running through the aux. So the first cabinet output of the Ampete is going into the aux, and then I'm going stereo out of the aux into my patch bay, which we'll get to in just a minute. So most of the guitar sounds that you're hearing when I'm playing an amp are the aux or the Torpedo Captor X. Sometimes I'll switch back and forth depending on the setup. Some interesting pieces here that are new. I've got my Grandville, the Port City Grandville. This is a collaboration that we did with Port City last year. This is based on a 1959 Gibson GA50. And I'm actually really happy to announce that these are now going into production this year. We changed the aesthetic a little bit, but if you're interested, you can order a Grandville. And then the 201, this was a gift from my wife, Tilly. This is an amazing tape echo unit, and I've been looking for one for a really, really long time. This one sounds amazing. It does need a little work. The reverb's not currently working, so I've got to get it serviced. This is my tube DI. This is the Zod DI, built by my friend Dan Derlot up in Minnesota. And this is a really, really killer tube-driven DI with massive transformers in it. We use this on bass a lot. I use this to record synth, and sometimes I'll send guitar through it or vocals through it as well. And then this is something that I bought in Nashville this past week over at Carter Vintage Guitars drink. I actually don't know what this is. I may end up doing a video on this very soon. So it's in an old projector amp, but someone built a guitar amp into it. And I'm not sure if they used some of the original projector amp circuitry or if they completely gutted it. And the people at Carter actually didn't know either. They just said, whoever built it brought it in, asked if they could sell it, and they did. I bought it. It's kind of Tweed-esque, but it's got a lot more gain than a Tweed amp does. And it does this really cool like low mid thump kick kind of thing. It sounds amazing. So I'm really excited about that. And then I also picked this up for a really good deal from Carter. This is a Fender tube reverb tank. So there's a tube preamp in here that drives a spring reverb tank. You can put it in front of an amplifier, but the main reason I bought it was to use for mixing and recording. I want to be able to put vocals through this, put drums through this, any other thing where you want a really lush, drippy spring reverb. These are really cool, and this is a Silverface one from the 70s, which are more affordable and easier to get than the original late 60s units, but they sound great. And then down here I have my studio pedal board. This is the pedal board that I use most of the time when we're making videos in here. It just sits on the floor, stays patched into the amp switcher, stays powered back up there, so I can just plug my guitar into it. And then because there's no loop switcher or anything like that, I can just pop up the pedals off the board and swap in whatever I might need for that specific video. So I still have this set up from the Schofield video that we shot the other day. We were using the Rat, and the Mjolnir for that. And then here we have the guitar rack, and these are all the guitars that I use most often, so they live next to the desk. I have another rack in the closet, which is stuff that's important but gets used less often, that stays back there. But yeah, that's basically the whole amp rack and setup. Okay, so let's move on to the desk. Now the desk is from Gator, and I got this about 2 years ago when I originally set up and built this room, and I've been using it basically every single day since then, and I have to say it's held up incredibly well. I was using a desk that I bought from Guitar Center for a few years before this, and it was good, but it didn't hold up to daily use nearly as well as this Gator desk has. It's got a ton of rack space, and one of my favorite things about it is the cable management system under the desk, which we utilized really heavily yesterday when we were rerouting everything. But it's a really good size. It's easy to work at. The rack and the monitor platform are at a really good level for me. So the monitor's in a really good position for me, and it's got my computer screen and everything I need in the right place. It's super ergonomic. And the sidecar section, which I'll show you in just a minute, is my favorite thing about this desk. It's got a pull-out slide here for my MIDI controller, which we use when we're programming drums or putting down keys parts for tracks. But yeah, it's been an excellent desk. It's held up super well. The finish is still intact. There's no scratches or wear and tear on it, and we haven't been gentle on this thing at all. So I gotta say, I really like it. And also, while we're here, let's talk about the computer setup. Now, I've been a Mac user for 10 years now. When I started my channel, I was using a 2017 iMac 27-inch. And a few months ago, I switched that out to an M1 MacBook Pro. Just the regular one, not the Max or whatever the highest spec is. And that computer's been great. I was using it with a dock attachment from OWC that I purchased, and it was really powerful, super good. I like the M1 stuff a lot. But just recently, a few weeks ago, I purchased the Mac Studio. Now, this is not the top spec. It's just a mid-tier Mac Studio. It's 32 gigs of memory, and kind of mid-level. The one thing I did spec is a 1 terabyte internal SSD. I do that for all of my computers because I like to store all my programs, my plugins, my sample libraries. Everything is stored on the computer. And then when we're editing, we do all of our recording and editing on external SSDs. This is a really important workflow thing for us, whether we're working on music or we're working on video. And it's an important thing for those of you that might be interested in starting out in content, whether you're doing YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or whatever. Basically, when we start a new project, we create a folder for that video on an external SSD. And all of the footage, all the assets, all the audio, and the edits, the actual sessions for Pro Tools and for Final Cut or Premiere, live in that folder for that project. This helps to keep everything organized, and then for backing up and archiving footage, right now I'm using these old school, deep and cheap spinning disk storage drives. I know it's not great. I'm trying to work on a better archiving and storage solution, some kind of network access storage. I'm trying to learn about that stuff right now. If you have any recommendations for that, let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, external SSDs is what we work on. I'm a big fan of the Samsung T7. I bought this one a few months ago off of Amazon. This one's great, but for a long time, we've been using these G Drive. This is the G Drive SSD. These are great for video editing if you are doing content creation. Now for programs, we're actually switching things up right now. For recording for my DAW for the last few years, I have been using Luna from Universal Audio, and I like Luna a lot. I specifically like the way Luna sounds. It's designed to basically be an analog recording console in the box, and it sounds great. The tape emulation, the console summing, the bus compression on every channel is really, really great. But we started to run into issues a lot recently with Luna that were really starting to impact my production and my workflow. Pretty serious software issues. Now, I think part of it was switching to the M1 Mac Studio. It's on the latest Mac OS right now, and I think Luna wasn't really playing nicely, but it was enough of a concern that we have now switched back to Pro Tools. I'm on the latest version of Pro Tools. I learned how to record on Pro Tools. It's sort of what's most comfortable for me. It's what I like. And for the studio downstairs, it's going to be our DAW of choice because we're going to primarily be live tracking full bands down there. And if you're working in that environment, Pro Tools is the way to go. And Pro Tools is the industry standard. So if I want to record something here and send it off to someone to mix, I can send them the Pro Tools session, or I can go to any recording studio, basically anywhere in the world, and be working on a DAW that I'm familiar with. As far as video editing goes, I'm also making a switch there. For the last 3 years, I've been working in Final Cut Pro, and I never really liked it. I learned how to make videos in Adobe Premiere Pro, and I switched to Final Cut 3 years ago because my iMac was starting to get a little sluggish, and Premiere Pro wasn't really working fast enough, specifically on export times on that old Intel machine. So I switched to Final Cut because it's Apple native and it ran much faster, specifically exported much faster. But now with this M1, it's not that big of an issue anymore. And I've started running into some software bugs with Final Cut as well. So we are gonna be switching back to Premiere Pro here in the coming weeks. And that's the computer and software side of things. I do have a Mac Mini set up behind me, which I will show you whenever we get to the sidecar. But this is my main production and recording video editing setup right here. So now, recording interfaces. Since about 2020, I've partnered with Universal Audio, and I've been using the Apollo series of interfaces, and I have to admit, I genuinely love them. I know that it is sort of sponsored. I didn't pay for any of these Apollos. Universal Audio gave them to me whenever we were doing Backstage Live, my live stream concert series during the pandemic. But I'm sold on the UA platform. This is what I'm going to be using for the foreseeable future. So what we have here are a pair of X8Ps and an X4. So these are all tied together via Thunderbolt 3. So essentially this top Apollo is the brains of the operation. This is the main Apollo. This is what my monitors are plugged into. And then I'm using my X4 here on the desk as a monitor controller. So I don't have to, cut and boost my monitors there. I can use it here. And then this bottom X8P is there primarily just for channel count. Now I've thought about swapping these two units out for an X16 just to save the rack space, because as you'll see in a minute, I'm primarily using outboard gear, outboard mic preamps and everything. But it is really nice to have the unison mic pre's in these X8Ps. It gives me more options. I can get different colors for mic preamps. Or what we do a lot for bass sounds, for example, is plug DI into the Apollo and use one of the UAD bass amps like the B15 or the SVT. Now these units have held up incredibly well. I will say, in the effort of transparency, that this Apollo did have a hardware issue. The Thunderbolt card on the back of it went bad and caused me to have issues with connection. But I got in touch with Universal Audio support. They sent me a new Thunderbolt card, and I just pulled the old one out and stuck the new one in with a couple of Allen screws, and that fixed it. Now directly above that, this is a brand new piece of gear that we just installed yesterday, and this is going to be for the new recording setup, the Studio Build 1.0, if you will. This is a Behringer Powerplay 16 module, and this is a monitoring system for the recording studio downstairs. I have a series of Behringer P16 personal mixers, so all the musicians downstairs can dial in their own personal mix with up to 16 channels. And so this is the sort of brains of that monitor system. It's connected via ADAT optical out of both of these Apollos in the back. So I have 16 channels that get sent through this Cat5 or Cat6 cable downstairs. Now the cool thing about this is because it's attached to the Apollos, we're not just monitoring, we're hearing all the processing that's happening as well. So any processing that's happening with compression or EQ, either in my outboard gear or in the UAD world, we're gonna be able to hear in our monitors. So for example, if I have Noah singing and he wants an EMT 140 plate reverb on his voice, we can pull that plugin up in console and we'll actually be able to monitor that in real time, which is super cool. Now speaking of monitoring, let's talk about the speakers on the desk here. These are the Yamaha HS7s. I got these and the matching subwoofer when I moved into this room. And the reason was, at the time when we moved in, I was still using the space at my parents' house for recording and rehearsals. And so my original monitors, which I was using, are the Event PS6s, which unfortunately are no longer made anymore. But I needed those events to stay over there so we could continue to record and mix and keep the projects going that we had over there. But I've been using these for about 2 years and I've been really happy with them. I think they're a good all-around monitoring system. They're not the best sounding thing out there, but they're affordable. And they work for a variety of rooms and variety of situations. Now, I like using a subwoofer personally, but you don't need one to mix or to monitor on. And in fact, depending on your room, you may not want a subwoofer. Subs are not perfect for all mixing situations, especially if you're in a small bedroom like this. And in fact, I should probably rely and use mine less, but I just like having that subwoofer and that sub bass information coming through. Now, I've enjoyed using the Yamahas for the last few years and I've gotten good results with them, but looking ahead at some of the projects we've got going up and some of the mixing that we're going to be doing, I wanted to go ahead and upgrade my monitors ahead of finishing the control room downstairs. So I reached out to Adam Audio and they sent me a pair of the new A77Hs to check out. So these are the A77Hs. They're designed to be set up in this horizontal configuration here, which is going to be great for the room downstairs, but it's going to be a bit of a challenge trying to figure out how to fit them into my current setup over here, but we'll figure it out. Now these are cool, they're active, so they have built-in power amps, much like the Yamahas do, but these have DSP built into them as well for room adaptation, for kind of shaping the sound and the response of the monitor to fit the room. And in this room, that's gonna be very, very important because acoustically, it kind of sucks in here. So this is a 12x16 bedroom, but it's got an interesting feature, which is the ceiling line. Over here, the ceiling is about, I don't know, maybe 20 feet high, but by my desk, it's 8.5. So basically the room is kind of shaped like a big wedge. Now, as you can see, we've put acoustic treatment up, which we did when we initially built this room. And it's the Clear Sonic room treatment kit. And it's done a good job, but as you can hear through the mic on my camera, the room is still pretty live. And when we're actually recording for videos and using my shotgun, I have to use some plugins to kind of tamp that down a little bit. Now that's not necessarily an issue for mixing. You don't want a completely dead space to mix in, but the big issue in here that we need to address is the bass buildup. When you're sitting at mix position, it's not that bad. It's a pretty balanced overall sound, but as you start to walk back in the room over here, or as you start to sit on the couch here, the bass is unbelievably loud. But I definitely want to treat this space a little better, get it a little tighter, better for recording videos in and vocals in, but specifically better for mixing in. So if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. All right, so now let's talk about the outboard gear here in my studio. The term outboard gear basically is referring to any type of recording equipment or any piece of recording equipment, like a mic preamp, for example, that exists outside of a console. It's outboard. Now, my plan for the studio downstairs is to have a large format recording console in the control room. That's my dream. I don't know which one yet, but for the past 6 or 7 years, I've been recording with and using mostly outboard gear. So we're gonna start with my mic preamp rack. These are 500 series modules. Now 500 series is a format, it's like a size format of module that was created by API back in the 60s, 70s, I wanna say. But it's become kind of an industry standard when it comes to outboard gear, not just for mic preamps, but all kinds of stuff, EQs, compressors, effects, utility things like breakout boxes and DIs. Now the way lunchbox systems work is you have some kind of rack system that holds each one of the modules, and it provides power and signal. It gets the signal in and out of the actual mic preamp. And then each one of these little modules here, you can swap in and out per channel. So this is 8 channels of mic preamp. These first 4 channels are all from a company called Cappy. Now Cappy is a really cool company. They do a lot of API style mic pre's and EQs and compressors. I bought my first few Cappy preamps from Rick Beato years and years ago. And they're cool because you can either buy them pre-made like these units, or if you're handy, you can buy them as kits and assemble them yourself. So if you're new to this and you want to get a couple of mic preamps to start recording with, but you want to save some money and you want to learn a little bit about how mic preamps work, you can build your own pre. Now, a few years ago, Cappy reached out to me and loaned me these 6 channels of mic preamps, and there's 3 different styles of mic pre in 3 different stereo pairs. So we've got the VP312s PTA, we've got a pair of VP28s here, and then the FD312s. Now these FD312s are my favorite mic pre's I've ever used. 99% of the time when you hear my guitar on a video coming from the amp, or even when I'm using a modeler, the guitar is going through this pair of FD312s. I'm not exactly sure what these are based on or if it's Cappy's original design, but these are really, really special preamps. I'm a huge fan. These are the WHR4 models. I could have a whole rack, a whole 16 channels of just these FD312s, and I'd be super happy. And then we have another pair, channel 7 and 8, of Great River mic pre's. These are the MP500Vs, and these are another personal favorite of mine. These are more Neve style. They're supposed to be in the flavor of like a Neve 1073. So these 4 channels together here, the 2 FD312s from Cappy and the MP500s from Great River, cover the Neve and the API sound really, really well. But if you're looking to get into outboard gear and you're doing a lot of recording at home, a good mic pre is a great place to start. Even if you're just recording guitars or you're using a modeler, for example. I like taking a digital sound source like a guitar modeling amp, Kemper, XFX, whatever, and running it through a really good pair of mic pre's that have good transformers in them, and using that to kind of warm up and saturate my guitar sound. Same thing with the aux, or if I'm miking up a guitar cab. Outboard mic pre's are a really cool place to start, and they're a lot of fun to play with. If you have them in this 500 series format, you can change them out relatively easily. Depending on what you get, they're pretty affordable. You can pick them up used. They're a really cool place to start if you're getting your feet wet in the outboard recording gear world. Okay, so now we're onto this rack, and I've got another 4 channels of mic preamp up here. This is the 4710D from Universal Audio. This is another really great place to start if you're thinking about getting into outboard recording gear for the sound and for the workflow. Basically what this is 4 channels of mic preamp with built-in 1176 style compressors. So you're basically getting 4 channels of mic pre and compression in a 2U rack space. What's really cool about this though is the mic preamps can be either tube mic preamps or transistor solid state mic preamps, or a blend of the two. You have these blend knobs on each channel that allow you to get more of a warm, saturated tube sound or a little harder, faster transistor sound. You also have DIs for each channel. So if you're recording bass, you're recording guitar DI, you can do that. And then if you want, you have 2 settings for compression for an 1176 style compressor. There's a slow or a fast attack time setting. And the other cool thing is there's insert points on the back for each channel. Now what this means is if you don't have a patch bay, you could basically treat this as the centerpiece of your studio and create sort of a permanent signal chain. If you've got an EQ or effect, like a reverb or delay, for example, you can patch those into each channel on the back, and then you have a switch to be able to turn on or off the insert on the back. So again, if you're someone who is starting with, like an 8-channel interface and you want to start to get into outboard recording gear at home, and maybe you're a drummer or you need to record up to maybe 4 mic sources at one time, the 4710D I think is a really, really cool piece of gear, and it's a great place to start and build your studio around. Now sitting up here on top of the 4710D is a cool piece of gear that I'm just trying out. You may see a review of it here on the channel. This is called the Elk Bridge, and essentially what this is designed to do is connect you to other musicians over the internet via an online interface, and this box here to be able to play in real time with almost no latency remotely. Now, I just got this set up. We haven't tried it out yet, but I'm going to be trying it out with my band Good Trouble to see if what they claim is actually true. If you can actually play with musicians over the internet. Now down here in the rest of the rack, we have 3 channels of compression and an EQ. So starting at the top, we have the Warm Audio Tube EQ. This is basically Warm Audio's clone of a Pultec EQ1P. Now below that, we have the Warm Audio WA76. This is their 1176 clone. Now, the 1176 is a staple piece of gear in my opinion. If you're one of those people that's looking at getting into outboard gear and you want a really great outboard compressor, especially if you're a guitar player or a bass player, an 1176 I think is a great place to start. Now the Warm Audio stuff I think is pretty good. I've enjoyed using it over the past couple months. I will say you can tell where they're saving some money. The build quality is not quite as nice as a higher end piece of gear. Like the 1176s, for example, I used to have a pair of Purple Audio 1176s. They were called the MC77s.
I wish I never sold them. But just the fit and finish, the quality of the knobs and the switches are a little bit cheaper, and I'm imagining the quality of the wiring on the inside is probably not as high end as something that you would get from a company like Purple Audio or a vintage Pultec, but the price reflects that. So if you're on a budget and you're looking to get into outboard gear and you don't want to spend a ton of money, Warm Audio is a good place to start. I think the Warm Audio stuff for me is good, like proof of concept stuff. For example, the EQ and this 1176, I've been using every single day. I use it on my shotgun mic to record vocals for my videos. So it tells me, yeah, this is a really useful piece of gear, so it might be worth me looking into upgrading to the higher end units for durability and that little extra sound quality over the Warm Audio stuff. But yeah, no real complaints. I think for the price, they're really great. Now below the 1176, I have my distressors. Now I bought these about 7 or 8 years ago from a studio that was closing up. I got a really great deal on them. And the distressor is another staple piece of gear. You're gonna see these in recording studios all over the world. And they're great because they're not just compressors, but they're distortion units as well. That's where the name distressor comes from, distortion compressor. Now, it's not gonna be like a fuzz box or an overdrive box, for example. Instead, what it's doing is emulating tube distortion and transformer distortion and the upper order harmonics and harmonic distortion that you get from pushing tape or pushing a transformer, but they're incredibly versatile. You can make them sound and respond like an LA2A, you can make them sound like an 1176, you can make the compression super subtle and just use it to add some saturation, or with the nuke setting, you can take a pair of drum room mics, for example, and just crush them and get a really, really unique sound that way. And now we're on to my second lunchbox setup. Now, the first lunchbox was mic pre's, and this is EQ, compression, and utility stuff. And it's here on the desk because I've got a lot of stuff here that I need to be able to look at and read pretty easily. So the first two slots, these are EQs. These are Harrison 32 EQs from Great River. And then over here, we've got a pair of compressors from Great River. These are the PWM 501s. And then next to that, we have another pair of compressors from Cappy. These are the FC 526s. And these are really like the color and sort of the saturation you get from these when you really start to push them. These are killer on bass. I've been using these on bass a lot recently, and I'm excited to start using them on drums more, specifically drum overheads, to see how they respond. Now next to that, I have a pair of radial ecstasies. Basically, this allows me to patch any guitar pedal, either in mono or stereo, into my patch bay and use it to mix with or to record with. So typically guitar pedals want to see instrument level signals, which are pretty weak and pretty low gain. But once you're recording through mic preamps and going in and out of your interface, you're working with line level, which is significantly louder and more powerful. Most guitar pedals, especially distortion boxes, fuzz pedals, can't handle line level. So what this box does is takes the line level signal, converts it to instrument level, and then you have an effects loop here. You send to the pedal, and then you come out of the pedal into the ecstasy where it gets converted back to line level and then into your DAW. Using my Strymon Deco, one of my favorite pedals, I can patch it stereo in to this and send drums through it, or send my entire mix through it if I want. These are super cool. They're worth having around. They also make it in like a floor DI box, so you don't have to have a 500 series unit as well. If you're mixing and recording a lot and you have a few guitar pedals, I highly recommend getting one of these or a pair of these to start experimenting with. It's so much fun. You're gonna start to like take pedals that you haven't used in a long time and start experimenting with them and putting them on your mix or your keys or your bass or your vocals, whatever. These things are awesome. So now we're onto the sidecar attached to the Gator desk here. And like I said, this is one of my favorite parts about this desk. You have this pull out slide here, which typically houses a pedal board that I use. And then in here, I have my Mac Mini, which is my other computer. And this sort of section is like my podcasting and live streaming rig. So this Mac Mini is attached to my old Focusrite Scarlett interface here. So whenever it's time to record my podcast with Zach, Dipped in Tone, which link down below if you haven't checked it out, I don't want to have to break down or repatch a bunch of stuff that I might be working on at the time for a video or for a song. So I have this system that's independent of my recording and YouTube computer. So that lives here in this Sonnet Rack Mini rack mount, which is cool because if you have two Mac Minis, you could put two in here. Don't really know why you would, but the main thing I want to focus on here is the patch bay. So this is the hub of the studio. Everything that we have talked about so far, from the amp rack to the computer to the interfaces, and especially the outboard gear, are all connected in some way to this patch bay. Now, if you're not familiar, a patch bay's job is to take all of this gear, specifically the outboard gear and the interfaces, and bring it all into one place. Because if you notice, all the gear we've looked at so far doesn't have input and output points on the front. Everything's on the back. So what that would mean is if I had to set up a mic to record a vocal, I'd have to take a bunch of XLRs and get behind all this gear and connect into one, then out, and then into another, and then out. It would be a huge, huge pain, and actually would be impossible for me. I can't get behind this desk every day. So instead, what we've done is use this patch bay and brought the inputs and outputs of just about every piece of gear in the studio to this one place. So I've got everything labeled here, and we break it down in 8-channel chunks. So each one of these 8-channel blocks is a different section of gear. So for example, this first 8 channels here and here, that is my top Apollo. You can see I've got it labeled X8P line in. The next 8 channels are my second Apollo. Now where it starts to get interesting is as we move over to this side of the patch bay. So if you pan the camera over, you can see on the floor there, I've got a snake, an 8-channel snake. And that's where I patch in things like my shotgun mic or my podcasting mic up here. So to kind of demonstrate this, I'm gonna patch my shotgun mic above me like I would if I was recording a YouTube video. So right now you're hearing the mic on the camera. So the microphone is plugged into channel 1 of my snake on the floor over there. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take this patch cable. This is called a TT, tiny telephone connection. And I'm gonna go out of channel 1 on the studio snake here. So as a general rule, your patch bays are organized with inputs on the bottom row and outputs on the top row. At least that's how we've organized this patch bay. So I'm gonna take the output of that snake, and now I have my microphone signal coming down this connector here. And I'm gonna pick a preamp. So let's say I wanna send it into this preamp right here, this VP28 on the desk. Well, I know because I have it labeled that it is this patch point here on the patch bay. So it's VP28 input, which is the bottom row. So now I have my microphone going into that unit. And as you can see, as I'm talking up here, I'm actually metering. So now we know I've got input going into the mic preamp, but it's stopping there because I don't have anything patched on the output. So now what I do is right above it, I patch the output of that mic pre. Now my signal's coming down this cable, and I want to send it to my EQ. I want to go into the tube EQ up there. So I go input of the tube EQ. Now it's going into the EQ, but it's not coming out. So I have to come out of the EQ. And then from there, I want to go into my 1176 right under it. So I'm going to go into the 1176. And if I start talking, you can see that now the meter on my 1176 is jumping, telling me that I'm getting signal in. And so now what I want to do is take it out of the compressor, the 1176, and I want to go into one of my Apollos. So I'm going to go output of the 1176, and I go line input of the Apollo. And if you look up on the desk, you'll see the meter on the Apollo jumping. Now again, a patch bay is not something that you need to have a nice recording studio set up. In fact, there's a lot of great studios that don't have a patch bay at all. But for me and my workflow, where I'm doing a lot of different types of recording, sometimes in a single day I'll record voiceover for a video, then I'll work on a track where I'm recording guitar, bass, vocals, drums, keys, then I'll work on a video course, then I'll go back to working on another track in the course of one day. I need to be able to change my signal routing at the drop of a hat, and that's what this patch bay does for me. Okay, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, I'm Conrad. I play bass with Rhett a lot, and I have my own YouTube channel, but when I'm not doing that, I work in the film and television business, and I do sound on movie sets.
What are some of the things you've worked on?
I don't know if I should say.
What? You're in the credits. Like,
I don't want to be like
just
I
get
don't
rattle
wanna
off
be like
some
that, man.
credits. Come on, just
They
do
can
it.
look me up on IMDb. if
No,
they want
just say like give me 2 examples of something you should.
Okay, I have done a week on set for Stranger Things as a secondary boom op. Did work on Dear Evan Hansen. I've worked on second unit for Jungle Cruise. I did a show for Paramount Plus called The Game. It's a football drama. I did a lot of She-Hulk. If you saw the Marvel She-Hulk, I've done a handful of things for Marvel. So anyway, a couple years ago, Rhett asked me to help him set up a good mic for his YouTube videos, and I recommended this Sennheiser, this MKH50. So this is a hypercardioid, or like a super shotgun. It has a really nice pattern. It's concentrated. It would be cool to do this where like I could talk and you could see the pattern, but basically if Rhett's sitting here.
Wait, hold on. We can make this happen. Hold on. So
Okay, sweet. So what I do on set is I'm holding this microphone on the end of a pole and I'm trying to get it just outside of the frame of the camera, but as close as I can to the actors, right? So this microphone is designed to have some reach, but still to maintain the lush, full frequency content. So I guess, yeah, you guys can hear this mic. Okay, I can't hear it, but as I'm moving towards it, you hear how rich and full that is. But then as you move out of the pattern, not only are you losing volume, but you're losing some frequency. So what that means is this microphone's proximity, getting it really nice and close to the person talking, it's gonna sound awesome. This one is today, like if you go to a movie, you probably are hearing this one because it has a great low end and it has a really nice pattern. So it's just a great microphone. So as you can see, when Rhett's sitting here talking to the camera, let's say the camera was here, this would be just out of the frame. And this is a game of millimeters because like as a boom operator, you're trying to get this in the safety. Like if there's the frame around someone who's talking, I don't know where it is, where's my hand? So what I would want is to have the microphone just right there. Because if you can get it right on the edge of that frame, it's gonna sound lush and full and great, and it's gonna sound a whole lot better than a lavalier. A lot of people like to use lavaliers, which have their application as well, but it's like comparing like a cinema camera to your iPhone. Like which one's gonna look better? Like the cinema camera, right? The diaphragm on this mic is so much bigger. It's just designed to sound awesome and to really capture the likeness of the human voice. So it's a great mic, MKH50.
okay, so now we're gonna talk YouTube setup, starting with my cameras. Now, since I started my channel, I've been shooting on Sony cameras. I really love Sony. I'm not sponsored. I've bought all these cameras at full price over the years. I started on an A6500, I think was my first Sony camera. And then not long after that, I moved into these, and I bought a pair of these, which is a Sony A7 III. They're a little outdated now, but they're incredible cameras. They're super powerful. This is now my B camera that we use for B-roll or a tight shot on a guitar when I'm doing a video course or a lesson. And my former A camera, which was also an A7 III, just went to my wife, Tilly, who is starting her channel now. She's a film photographer, analog photographer, and she needed an A cam. So I gave her my A camera and then just recently upgraded this camera to the A7S III. And I've been super happy with this camera. It's a pretty big step up, I think, from the A7 III in terms of quality and features. And the image quality is better, but the big jump is in low light performance. When I'm filming, especially downstairs now where everything is black and super dark, the S3 is unbelievable in low light. It's super good. The lens that you're currently on now is the 24-70 G Master. I bought that with that new camera. Whereas before I've been using a combination of Sigma lenses. So this is the Sigma 35 1.4 art lens. Great lens for the money, but really heavy and kind of bulky. They're not good lenses if you're doing a lot of vlogging or running around, that kind of thing. For the wide shot that we've been using for this video so far, this is the Sony 14mm G Master 1.8, and it is super wide. In fact, for most things that I do, it's actually too wide, and it's really small and lightweight. So for vlogging and walking around, you can just throw this on the camera and it kind of doesn't matter where you're pointing because you're gonna get something in the shot. Now my lighting setup in here is actually something that I feel like we just recently got really dialed in. So my key light is an Amran 200X. It's the budget version of the Aperture like 60D that so many YouTubers are using. When I initially bought it, I had the big light dome attached to it, and it looked nice, but it was just so big and bulky in here, it really took up too much space. So since the walls are white in this room, I literally just turned it around and fired it into the ceiling in the corner behind me, and now basically my wall and my ceiling are acting as a softbox. So my key light is much softer because it's coming from a really wide source up there. And that could be a really cool way if you're just starting out and you don't have a ton of money to spend on lighting, getting one really powerful key light. And if your walls are white or white-ish, you can use your wall as a big softbox and then set your white balance on your camera accordingly. Now for the hair light or the rim light behind me, I just replaced that. That's a Nanlite Forza 60. I bought that recently and I don't really like it. It looks good and it's plenty powerful, but it has a built-in fan that constantly runs and it's loud enough that my shotgun mic picks it up. And then back in this back corner here, I've just got kind of an accent light sort of lighting my background. That's one of my old Amazon LED light panels that I started with a few years ago. It's just there to kind of light my background, light the amp rack a little bit, and highlight around me. So when I'm sitting here in my main position talking to camera, the wall and area behind me is lit, which helps me kind of stand out from the background a little bit more, especially if I'm wearing like a lighter color shirt, which I typically don't do. I only wear black shirts. I'll try and link some channels that I really love for this kind of stuff where I learned a lot of this. DSLR Video Shooter is one of my favorite channels. I don't know him at all, but I've learned so much from watching his videos over the years about lighting and cameras and all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in getting into this kind of thing, I would definitely recommend his channel.
So this is my studio setup. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you want more information on the gear and stuff that we talked about today, there are Sweetwater affiliate links in the description box down below. Huge thanks to Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. If you want to be entered to win that pro home studio setup, check out the link in the description box down below. Be sure to subscribe. I'm really excited about the projects that we have coming up in the Studio Build 1.0, if you will, downstairs, the black hole. That's gonna do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, there is no plan B.